So hi, I'm here with Stephen Savile to talk about himself, his books, and his working with us for dyslexic-friendly books that we're doing. So firstly, please can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi. Well, first, obviously, thanks for inviting me in to be part of this. What can I say? I'm old. This means I've been around forever. I've been writing, God, I think my first sale was in 1992. So, I'm coming up to my 30th anniversary next year. I've written for stuff like kids adaptations of Star Wars, Jurassic Park, right the way through to Warhammer and Slain 2000 AD, Doctor Who, Torchwood, all that stuff. I've also done my own fantasy novels through St. Martin's. I've done science fiction through Cambridge University Press. I've done audio originals. I mean, you name it. Basically, at the moment, I'm writing computer games for a company in China, which is a Viking fantasy, and I'm writing role-playing games. So that would basically be me. Do you know, it's so long ago that I don't really remember it clearly. I know we talked at FantasyCon in Scarborough when we met at a table for the Alchemy Books thing.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously the fact that my dad lives about 5 minutes walk from your shop.
Yeah.
Gave us something to talk about.
Yeah, we had a nice little chat.
Will frequently drop in. Yeah. So I remember that. And I remember you emailing and asking in theory if I'd be interested in helping out.
Yes, I asked you by email, and then I got your Facebook and got in contact, and then we carry on talking for a while.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly I pop up out of the blue. Oh, are you still interested in doing this?
That's right. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Having because we talked, and then I met Stan possibly in Scarborough as well, but maybe 2 years later or a year and a half later.
It will be one of the different cons, one of the fantasy cons probably, because I didn't guess he go to the fantasy cons. So you might have met him on the fantasy cons.
Yeah. And I remember then obviously you'd approached him and we talked about the contracts and everything.
That was
and just trying to get it all. Obviously, I mean, mine was slightly different in that it had been published in an anthology, whereas his was original. So there were differences
it was different
to work through.
Remember, I'm not coming from a publishing outlet. I'm coming from a bookseller. No experience in the publishing world.
And the whole plan was we both, and I'm assuming that will transfer onto, John and Stephen and is Tanya doing one?
Fanna's doing one. Adrian Sapkowski's doing one.
Adrian's the one I've forgotten.
Yeah, Adrian. So,
but that's it. I assume that the want to help is strong in all of us. The fact that I remember again, I'm so old. Mike Jeffries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the name? The author.
I heard the name, but I don't know him. He
did a series, Glitter Spike Hall, and some others. The Road to the Underdark. Think fantasy before fantasy. Oh God, this sounds so rude. Think fantasy before fantasy grew up.
Yeah, I understand that.
So you're talking same era as Eddings.
Mm-hmm.
Influenced by, say, Brian Jacks. Sort of
Pardon? Terry Brooks as well, that sort of time.
Yeah, But like, so you've got, talking animals and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have in a more modern
Yeah.
fantasy, etc. Right. So I met Mike, and I just loved him. It was a meeting with an author, and I'm just like, holy shit, this guy is beautiful. He's a beautiful human being. I'm going to go and buy his book and read it.
Yeah.
So I met him having not read the book at all. He was just doing a signing in Waterstones in Newcastle. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that Mike was dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just completely impressed at a man with, I think, 6 novels through HarperCollins was dyslexic. And the challenges he must have gone through to make it work. And I was asking him all these really freaking rude and awkward questions. But again, I was like one of the last people. There was no one else at the signing. Yeah. And he was explaining how he would dictate the story and his wife would type it. And they found ways it would work. And it always struck me. And then interestingly, I've had, I would say, at least once a year for the last 15 years, somebody has contacted me asking me, as a young dyslexic person who wants to be a writer, do I have any advice? Is there anything that can help? Are there mechanisms and anything? So when it came up, of all the things it could have been, the one that actually I'm like, you know what? That's actually one. I used to be a school teacher. I was a school teacher for a decade in Sweden. That's actually one I think, I want to help. I want to be involved somehow. And if it hadn't have been Holmes, I would have written you something else. Guaranteed. They're all different, right? If I talk about my experiences with Warhammer, for instance, because that's the obvious tie-in with like six books for them. The way that would work is, like my then editor would say, "Okay, Steve, we want a vampire book. We want the von Carstein vampires. You've got 3 pages in the army book that basically sum up the story of what we want." Now those 3 pages spanned 1,000 years, so that's an awful lot of wiggle room to create a series. So I went away. I wrote 5,000 word, 6,000 word outline for what I thought would be a good story. Editor then goes, can we do something here? Can we change something there? Can we end here? So, yep, sure. Because it's theirs.
Yeah.
It is all theirs. And you're much less possessive of it. And also, I mean, you learn a great lesson. As a writer, you don't have final say.
That's why I was leading.
You don't even. This is it. You don't even see the final product until it's on the shelf. Like with my Warhammer novels, they sent me the proofs to go through. I marked up all the proofs, did all the corrections, and you'd think at that stage, well, that's the book that's going to come out, but it's not. And then something like, Doctor Who, which has just such a wealth of history and background, or Stargate. I mean, Stargate, I ended up watching. I watched season 1 to like 10 in about 2 weeks. So it was just perpetual Stargate all morning, all afternoon, all evening, just to learn it inside out. And pitch the idea. This is the story. The story then goes to MGM. MGM go through it all and go, yep, perfect. That's what we want. That's great. Do that. You then go and write it. And again, it goes to MGM for approval. They read through everything. They vet it completely to make sure it's exactly what they want. And then it gets released. And then the fans will say, you've got no idea what you're talking about. And that's not what would happen. And this is wrong. And that's not right. And it's interesting because I guess like when you read a book, you see Druss in David Gemmell completely different to how I see Druss in David Gemmell. And you'd think with a visual that's provided by TV, you'd think, okay, well, you're all still going to see the same character and you know how that character talks. But you don't. I mean, with the Stargate specifically, the letter I got from MGM was brilliant. It said categorically that of all the books they'd done to that point, it was the one book that had caught the voices of all the characters perfectly. Now you go and look at the reviews, and the reviews are shocking.
It's because
the reviews pick up. Oh, and the reviews pick up about how the voice of the characters is all wrong. This is all wrong, and it's like, yeah, okay. We just have our own ownership of this stuff.
It's one of the downsides of franchise work, and it's also one of the great things of franchise work because it's everyone has an ownership to it in some ways, in their own mind,
and that's good. I mean, you want this investment. I mean, if I told you right now I'm writing a computer game for a mobile phone, and the projected audience is 80 million players. You want to talk about ownership? 80 million players. This game is going to be alive in the minds of 80 million people. There isn't a prayer that they're all going to experience the same game.
No, exactly.
It's just not.
And so even on a book which you've written or anyone's written, which is not franchise, it's just your own story, everyone's going to see the vision differently or pronounce the words differently. For me, I won't pronounce one word from one book differently from someone else pronouncing the word from one book, or names and other things. It just doesn't work. So,
there's an interview with David Gemmell on the French did an anniversary limited edition leather copy of Legend, and there's a DVD in the back of it, and there's an interview with Gemmell, and he says the name of, he says the name of a couple of characters. He says the name of Druss, but he doesn't say Druss. He says Druce. And I'm like, what? No, this character has been Druss in my head for 40 years. But that's not how Gemmell says it. And I can't remember the other one, but there's another one. And it is so far from how I say it. No, it escapes me now what it is, but it's another one of his characters. And I'm just sat there, I'm like, but these were my favorite books.
Yeah.
Is it Tanaka Khan? Is it Tanaka Khan? Something where there is this wealth of tradition and ownership actually, I think, sets you up quite well for the madness of trying to write Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah.
Because we all have, whether it's our Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes, our Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes, whether it's Benedict Cumberbatch or
Elementary.
Yeah, Elementary, absolutely, with Lucy Louise Watson. We all have like different interpretations, and actually so many of us haven't read the original stories. We've experienced them on like the BBC radio plays, or we've experienced them on the television. Well, for me, my first experiences of Holmes were always I guess it was, you had the 20-minute Doctor Who episode at like 5:30, 6 o'clock on BBC Two with Peter Davison, and then you had what, an hour and a half Basil Rathbone movie,
Yeah.
and it was every night. So my experience absolutely was coming from home, was doing my homework, racing to finish the homework, to sit to just get to see Doctor Who, and then relax and watch the Sherlock Holmes. So, for instance, I remember being really surprised when my editor of the Murder at Sorrow's Crown, the Holmes novel, pointed out that Watson never ever calls Sherlock Sherlock. Because, of course, in the newest Stephen Moffat version, he's always calling him Sherlock.
Yes,
and you know, Lucy Liu always calls him Sherlock. And it's actually, no, they don't. In the books, Watson calls him Holmes. And it's a little tick. It's just a little thing. But the purists who love Holmes for being Holmes are going to crucify you for getting it wrong, because it shows you don't know your source material. And that's something that you don't really face when you're writing your own original fiction. You know,
was it quite daunting when you, because you did the story for our Dyslexic Friendly books, which is Sherlock Holmes, Four Kings of Sweden. Was it quite daunting trying to do Sherlock and in your interpretation of it?
You know, I wrote it intending to have fun, and there's an awful lot of humor in it that you won't necessarily know, because you don't realize that the bumbling policeman who's helping Sherlock is my best friend Stefan. The villain who they're hunting is my other best friend Thomas. You know, so it's a gift to my friends. The house that they go to, because I live in the village where it's set.
Oh, okay,
that's the village I live in.
Yeah,
and everything is historically accurate.
Yeah,
the silver mines, everything are there, and the house that, as I describe it, the house is all twisted askew, so all the beams are wrong. That's my brother-in-law's house. And so there are all these little bits.
Well, it comes through.
Oh yeah, and
it comes, the fun and enjoyment of the writing of it comes through. I enjoyed reading it.
Well, thank you. But also we have this thing that you can Google called the Savile League, and it's this big criminal gang that were operating at exactly the end of Sherlock's career. So it was perfect to actually bring Holmes in to bust the criminal gang. It was just a super amount of fun. And I don't want to talk too much more because I'll give the whole thing away, because it's only short.
So the reason why it's set in Sweden in many ways is because it's all to do with you and your friends and your family and your life.
Yeah.
It's quite a varied career, to be honest, doing lots of different things and lots of different books.
Well, the thing is, right, when I started writing, nobody said, oh, you can only do this. So basically, I've made an entire career of just following what interested me. If I thought something sounded fun, if I thought it sounded exciting, interesting, then yeah, I'll give it a go. I think sometimes people tend to forget. It might take you like an hour, 3 hours, 6 hours, 2 days, a week to read a book. But for us, we're in there for 3 months, 6 months, a year. If it's not something we're really interested in, if it's not something that we're passionate about, then it's torture, because it's your actual life. You know, you're giving up days and weeks and months of your life, not just a few hours to read it. So yeah, I think it's always best to pursue something your heart burns for, even if it means your career ends up quite fractured. And yeah, you get this idea in your head, I think when you're quite young, that eventually you'll get to a point where, you know, you're so successful, people stop rejecting you. Nope.
No,
That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen, or it shouldn't. You should never be in a position where even the biggest piece of crap you do.
Yeah. Well, that's very good advice for anyone who's writing. Anyone who's writing, just accept you're going to get rejections.
Yeah.
It needs to happen. I've read some books, to be honest, from authors who are so large, you think they really haven't been edited. They haven't been done anything. They're just. I'm not going to name their names, but you're thinking, really?
I read a series last summer and the summer before, and I can absolutely guarantee that writer was not edited.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean not edited heavily, I mean not edited.
You can tell me later.
Not a word. Yeah. Yeah, not on camera.
No, you can tell me later.
Now, if we were really at EasterCon, this would be in the bar.
Oh dear.
I think as a writer, as somebody who tells stories, I have a responsibility to try to foster, nurture the mythic process in young readers, in older readers, and give them a chance to fall in love the way I fell in love. And I truly believe that we all, every single one of us, deserve the chance to experience the story equally. I think it's fundamentally, vital that, you know, every man, woman, child comes into it on as level a playing field as possible. And if I can do anything to improve that situation, such as being part of the Dyslexic Friendly project here, then yeah, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to want to do it. In the same way that I would hope if I was in need, another creative out there would say, oh, yeah, that's a good thing to do. And I might benefit, and you might benefit, and someone else might benefit. Because at the end of the day, we all love stories. That's why we're here.